Good morning, good morning. How is everybody this morning? It's Friday. We made it to the end of the week. Woohoo! Work week anyway. Oh. I hope you're all having a beautiful day. Take a nice deep breath. Breathe deeply. Get your cup of tea or your coffee, your smoothie, your water, whatever you need. We're just going to take a minute here and take some good deep breaths. Breathe up in here, and then breathe in the middle. And then breathe in the middle of your rib cage. And then breathe low. Really get all of that oxygen going. Ooh. One of the most powerful ways of tapping that I have found in breath is not using your fingertips, doing the finger tapping, but doing an open palm where you're cupping. There's a little bit more of a resonance with that. Remember when you were a kid and you did that? And you can do it all the way down. Feels so much better. It's a good way to get started in the morning if you're struggling. This morning before I did my exercises, I got up and went to the bathroom and went back to bed, and I was going to do my exercises. Like, man, I feel like I need to do something a little bit extra today. So I really did some good tapping and it felt awesome. So today we're doing the 4-8 combo. And we're going to use the Lantern Oracle, and we're going to use the Medicine Heart Oracle, and we're still using 9, which is a Jehu. So I'm going to read the 9 one first. Nope, I'm not going to read that one first. I'm going to read this one first. I knew I had thought about it earlier, and then I forgot already. Okay, so Lantern Oracle, it's a mother's message. To see yourself with the eyes of love allows another to see unconditionally into you. Of equal importance is that, in turn, allows you to lovingly see others this way. It's a very powerful message, but there's a huge card reading for this. So today may take us a little bit longer because I'm going to read more, but I think it's important. There's a lot of messaging in here. And those of you who don't want to listen to me babble, that's fine. But I'm going to read both of them first before I talk about them, okay? So this one is key to intimacy. Intimate love is a core need to be met in relation to ourselves and those closest to us. The journey to intimacy often includes learning what love is not. Powerful, what love is not. Regardless of whether we have received unconditional love while growing up, coming to know and accept ourselves in such a manner is challenging. Unconditional self-love is necessary, and there is a learning curve for being able to allow another to see into us and accept all that we are not and all that we are. This includes our most raw and least flattering shades. We all have them. It is desirable, but not easy to let a deserving other into our lives deep enough to know our full spectrum. Once we can know, accept, and love all of who and what we are, we become fully available for another to accept the totality of us too. It also builds in us the strength and integrity to walk away from those who cannot genuinely respect or accept us, rather than internalizing their judgment, rejection, or desire to change certain parts of us. Developing the capacity to honor and care for ourselves despite our flaws and shortcomings also equips us to hold loving space for others without judgment, conditions, control, or petty rejection. The journey to self-intimacy further teaches us the value and beauty of our flaws. We learn to recognize any challenge that tests the intimate space we share with another as an opportunity to grow closer and stronger from working through it together. The purpose of obstacles is not to create distance or stop us, but to enrich, further connect, and expand us. Intimacy is as much about accepting each other's differences, struggles, and uniqueness as it is about respecting one another's boundaries. The key to intimacy with another leads to knowing, valuing, and supporting each other's paths. While it is necessary for our paths to parallel and be faced in the same direction, it is essential for them not to enmesh. Enmeshment, no enmeshment. Be careful to whom you trust the key for your heart. The featured mother wishes to remind you that pure love, respect, and integrity use what is uncovered to lift, support, protect, care about, and empower. In any instance that a person should prove unworthy of the key you have entrusted them by using it for anything other than anything out untoward, change the lock. It is never okay to have this sacred trust disrespected or abused. You always hold the right to take back your power. The same holds with you in regard to another's trust. Be equally honorable and respectful of how you treat any key given to you. If you ever need to hand a key back, do so. In respect of the intimacy you once shared with the individual, continue to manage with integrity and discretion that what was exposed in trust to you. Okay. There's so much messaging in that, but key to intimacy. Sorry, I heard something very strange. Okay, key to intimacy is the first card. And then, you can come up, Pastor? And then the section I want to read of Aju, which is number 23 in the Medicine Heart Oracle, is about confession. Confession may evoke mental or emotional resistance if one is grappling with toxic shame. See how these two go together? Toxic shame is different to healthy shame. The latter raises spontaneously when one takes action out of integrity with one's value system and motivates one to learn from the experience, act differently in the future, and if another has been injured in the process, make amends. So that's healthy shame. If a person with healthy shame can acknowledge making an error without feeling like it makes them a terrible person, and the process of confession is recognized for its liberating rather than shaming potential. However, toxic shame, any perceived error in judgment or action, will result in the personal anguish of believing that one is lacking in worth, value, and divine beauty. For such a person to confess something can be fraught with almost unbearable pain. It may feel like self-condemnation if they are to acknowledge an error. To realize that one's humanity of quirky, strange, weirdly wonderful personhood is meant to be an ongoing learning experience of trial and error, triumphs and mess-ups, pain and healing, ignorance and wisdom, disables the demon of toxic shame, which is perfectionism. Perfectionism is anti-human. The healing of toxic shame leads to being able to love, rather than fear or hate, ourselves and humanity. Such healing awakens the realization that one can do wonderful works and live according to a high-level value system, and generally be an excellent and valuable human being, whilst also being flawed, inconsistent, and even delightful, paradoxically, confoundingly incongruent. There will be moments where we lack spiritual skillfulness to deal constructively with our suffering and suffering of others, yet simultaneously we are utterly worthy, capable, and deserving of giving and receiving love. When this generous, unconditional friendship is applied to the self, there will be less reactive and judgmental finger-pointing at others in an attempt to alleviate our own inner pain of fearful shame. The ability to sit with our discomfort with compassion, and perhaps even transitory embarrassment and gentle humor, can do far more to unbind and empower the self-awareness and spiritual growth, and that toxic shame ever could. To note the absurdities of human behavior at times can transform mountainous problems to molehills and provide a feeling of relief and positive expectation that any difficulty will eventually give way to the greater loving of the universal divine heart. You have it within you to self-liberate from judgment, shame, fear, or guilt regarding any situation in your life where you feel bound. Do not give others the power to determine how you will experience your life. That power rests in your own heart, in your own willingness to embark upon the healing journey, to declare that you are worthy as a human and pure as spirit, that you can and will find what you need within your own soul, and decide to set yourself free. I love that. Okay, so, somebody said hi. Hi. Okay, so when looking at these cards, one of the things that it just really resonated was in the intimacy card, the phrase that I read at the very beginning, to see yourself with the eyes of love allows for another to see unconditionally into you. Of equal importance is that, in turn, allows you to see others this way. So there's a couple things with that. And then we go to the toxic shame. So there was a phrase in here. Okay, so healthy shame acknowledges that you made an error without feeling that it doesn't make you a terrible person, right? Like, oh, I made a mistake, but that doesn't make me a terrible person. And confession is recognizing that I made the mistake, I shouldn't have done that. It's liberating, it's not shaming, it has potential, and it goes into the unconditional self-love of the self. And then, this is the problem. In toxic shame, any perceived error is a judgment or an action that will result in the personal anguish that you believe that you are lacking worth, value, divine beauty. Confessing can be painful because it's self-condemnation rather than self-love. Healing toxic shame brings you to unconditional love. But to get there, you have to awaken the realization that you can do wonderful work and be an excellent human being while also being flawed, inconsistent, delightfully, paradoxically, confoundingly incongruent. Only you can set yourself free. You know, I have this person that, as I've been reading these cards, so it's a 4-8 combo in the transformational flow. And 4 is very much about the, well, I was going to read something else, but I can't find that book right off the top of my head. Okay, so 4 is very much this being in the relationship and honoring the beautiful timing and the interconnectedness that we can share in a very intimate, slow way, as well as the acceptance that you're going to be authentic. You're going to be authentic, I'm going to be authentic, and in our authenticity, new things are going to happen. It can be creative, it can be beautiful, but it's its own thing, and it has its own energy. 8 is about the integrity, holding the integrity. And there's a phrase in here, I just read it and I want to read it again. There's a phrase in here that reminds me of my beautiful 8s. To realize that one's humanity of quirky, strange, weirdly wonderful personhood is meant to be an ongoing experience. Oh yeah. Healing awakens the realization that one can do wonderful work and live according to a high level value system and generally be an excellent, valuable human being, whilst also being flawed, inconsistent, delightfully, paradoxically, confoundingly incongruent. That sentence right there reminds me of so many of the 8 people that I know. And when in the transformation, it's the complete acceptance that integrity can hold incongruency. Integrity can hold paradox. Integrity in action can hold positive and negative, plus and minus, shadow and light. But the only way that it's being held in that same space is if it's done with authenticity and unconditional love of the self, as well as how you're approaching other people. So one of the things about the shadow of that 4-8 transformation is that instead of loving yourself, you just go inside yourself and you shame, or you find deep, deep disappointment in everyone around you because they're not being authentic, as well as the inability, the other part of the shadow is the inability to honor that people can be incongruent in their still beauty of their who they are as entities, and not shame them or punish them, or it doesn't mean you don't have good boundaries, but you don't want to punish someone because that could spiral them into more shame, more disappointment, and fear. It can trigger fear in people. So one of the beautiful things about this transformation and how it has to do with devotional this week is that the unconditional love, and it's really funny when, well, not funny. It's not funny. It's not funny at all, but I do find kind of a little bit of connection. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for, connection. I find some connection in these cards today and my own experience in life. And by the way, like, this daily devotional, it's not about me, but I try to use my own stories rather than someone else's because I don't want to break HIPAA. But many years ago, I broke away from my family. I basically went toxic. I need to heal. I have stuff, and I'm not healing it. Y'all are, I'm very much the black sheep of my family. Like, I'm the one that calls out the confusion and the inconsistencies and the harm and all that. I'm that person. And so I broke away. And one of the things that I learned very early about self is that self-confidence is ego-driven if self-confidence does also not include self-love through humble acceptance of the flawed nature of how we live in the world. I don't know if that makes any sense. But because there was something that I was always encouraged when I lived with my parents, which was anytime I would struggle with something, my dad always approached, like, self-confidence isn't egotism, right? Like, self-confidence is feeling confident that you can do a thing, and if you can't do a thing, you would say, I can't do the thing. My father, who passed recently, and I am definitely going through that grieving process, he's probably the most humble person, not the most humble person I know, but he was a very humble person. He is. I mean, his spiritual entity is also humble. I mean, he's a very humble person. And when he retired, for example, and I only know this because I have not actually talked to him in 20 years. My son did a podcast with him, and they were joking in the podcast that he was working for this guy who had a woodworking shop, which is something I grew up watching my dad work with the lathe and woodworking tools and handcrafts and everything from embroidery to macrame to woodworking. And he was working with this guy when he retired, and he wouldn't let him pay him. He was like, "Oh, I'm in retirement. It's okay. You don't need to pay me." Because it was just the love of the work. He's very humble. But one of the things that he taught me that has really been reinforced over and over and over and over again in my life is that most people walk around completely oblivious that self-confidence is not really ego. It's not, I am confident, I know the thing. Ego is the, I'm ashamed that I don't know the answer. And so what little I do know, I'm going to latch onto, and I'm going to be obsessive about it, basically, right? And unconditional love doesn't change with the weather. It doesn't change with how somebody behaves. You can be hurt by someone and still love them. You can be disappointed. You can be afraid of something. You can be ashamed of something, but you always love them. And one of the things that I learned very early is that my bio mom goes to shame always. She knows, she thrusts shame out, and she behaves with shame. Shame is her demon inside, basically, and it interferes with her love. It interferes with the unconditional love because there's no self-love there. So it spirals. It spirals in that place where judgment of self means then you judge others. And shame and judgment definitely come together. And then I also know that my father's shadow is disappointment. And I know this because, well, it's either fear or disappointment. It's one of the two. He would use the word disappointment for me, and I was always very, very sad if he said he was disappointed in me. I remember that feeling of sadness and confusion. Like, why are you disappointed in me? And then he would have to like explain what it is I had done or how I'd behaved that made him sad, or made him disappointed or afraid for me. And he used both, but he used disappointment a lot. But in the intimacy, you can't have real intimacy in a relationship if you don't have this understanding that you yourself have to love yourself unconditionally to be able to love others unconditionally. And I remember asking my dad at some point, I was in elementary school still, because I asked him if he was a powerful person. I remember asking this question, are you a powerful person? And my dad chuckled and looked at me, and I was sitting in the chair. So we were in his big brown chair. I think it was a brown chair. And I'm pretty sure it was brown. And I was sitting next to him, and he had his arm around me, and we were kind of watching TV, and it was a commercial, I think. And I was like, Papa, are you a powerful person? And he chuckles, and his belly laugh was like deep, you know, like a belly laugh. And I didn't look at him. It was in his lap. You didn't need to look at somebody in the eye, but it would have been a weird kind of awkward turn. But he chuckled. I remember the belly laugh, and he was like, power is a very interesting question, or power is a very interesting thing. And he goes, I wouldn't want to be a powerful person because powerful people sometimes ignore and don't know how to love. And I thought it's kind of one of those memories that I don't always remember. It's kind of like in the background of things. Like, powerful people don't really love themselves, and they forget everybody else, right? Like, the unconditional love to be in the world means to accept the quirky inconsistencies of everyone around you and still love them and still accept them. And having deep intimacy is to love yourself to then be able to love other people. And his perception of how powerful people forget leads into this for me as an adult, as I look at that answer, I hear layers of that. I hear shame, fear, disappointment. I hear people that are caught in their own toxic shadow or their own toxic ego. And maybe they don't have that unconditional love of themselves, and they have missed the piece which connects them to everyone else, that makes everything so wonderful in the world. So for today's daily devotion, love yourself. Love your inconsistencies. Love all the things that don't seem to go right. Love your world. Love yourself in the world. Love that you've made mistakes. Love that you're inconsistent. Love that your brain doesn't work a certain way, or love that you forgot to pay a bill, or love yourself and love where you're at, and embrace all the quirky inconsistencies so that you can potentially see where the edges are for other people, and you can see how deep those relationships are. Because the one thing I want for everyone in the world is to understand how deeply intimate friendships can be. And I'm not talking about sexual intimacy. I'm talking about spiritual, energetic, people connection intimacy. I think of it like our animal companions. Like, there is a deeply unconditional loving intimacy between you and your dog, or you and your cat, or your horse. Like, they love you back unconditionally. There's no like, I'm only going to love you if you feed me, or I'm only going to love you if you pet me, or I'm only going to love you if you brush me a certain way. No, they just are. Their world is accepting of the intimacy of however you come into the world. Now, they might hide under the bed if you yell and scream at them. I stepped on Astra's foot yesterday because she was underfoot, and she went upstairs and ran underneath the bed, and I went up there and I talked to her, and she wouldn't let me near her, and I talked very calmly. I apologized. I told her I loved her, and then she came down 15 minutes later, crawled up in my lap, purring and rolling up in my lap. She was hurt, and I apologized. And people think I'm silly, like, well, a cat's not going to understand apology. How do you know? Are you a cat? You don't know. Unconditional love is intimate. It's caring. It's apologetic. It's accepting. It's also boundaries. Like, I'm not going to let someone, just because I love them unconditionally, beat the shit out of me, right? Like, no, that's a boundary. I gave you my key. I'm going to take that key back. Nope, you cannot hurt me. I'm not going to let someone in my family, I might love my family with all the love of my heart, but I'm not going to let them manipulate, abuse, and hurt me. I'm not going to let them do it. And it's okay to say, I love my family, and I'm also not going to let them treat me that way. Because I've learned that I can love myself unconditionally and also love you unconditionally. It gives my capacity more. But that also means that I will protect myself so that I can give more of myself to someone else who isn't going to hurt me. So go out in the world, people, and love yourself. That's what today is. Today is all about unconditionally loving yourself, finding the connections and the intimacies in your life that feel good, that you can recognize, acknowledge them. Doesn't mean you have to tell the person, oh, I'm intimately friends with you. I mean, people are going to probably think that's a little weird. Maybe don't do that. But definitely go out into the world today with these cards in mind and think about unconditionally loving yourself, recognizing those intimate relationships, and saying, okay, I can see this one. This one is a good one. Or this one, I gave you that key, but you keep twisting it. Acknowledge it. Maybe not do anything about it today. That's okay. You can't fix everything in a day. Don't turn your life upside down. But go out and love yourself. So give yourself a breath. Open everything up in your chest. Lift your chin and or your third eye or your head, whatever your head position feels good at. Mine always feels kind of good right about here. I really like how, it's funny, I'll lift my chin when people tell me to, but I really like how it feels right here. Feels good right there. Open your arms. If you want to expand back, you can. I kind of like the middle place where everything's kind of gentle in the middle. Breathe and just, I love myself. I love myself and I honor myself in the universe. I honor myself in my home, with my community, in my country, my world. I honor where we are in the moon and the sun. I honor where we are in the solar system. I honor all of the extraterrestrial entities. I honor all the star seeds. And I especially honor all of those who have a purpose and a reason for being here. And it's now apparently in the dark time, the time where we're all supposed to be really doing our work. So I want to honor the hard work that is. I want to honor you and share with you the phenomenal capacity that we have to have of our own self-love to be able to do this work. So have a beautiful weekend this weekend, my friends. And I send you that prayer. And I will see you in prayer next week. Blessed be.